Welcome. My name is Laura Moody, and I am the Executive Director of iFeeder, the Institute for Feed Education and Research. I'm joined today by Matt Sutton-Vermillion as the Principal for the Context Network and Emily Johans as the Senior Manager of Sustainability Sourcing at Nestle. And today we are exploring how downstream expectations of consumer product goods companies impact the feed industry. With a mission to advance the understanding and trust in a sustainable feed and pet food supply chain, iFeeder is using this webinar to raise awareness and inform our efforts to create a sustainability roadmap. And that effort is going to be to assess industry and stakeholder sustainability needs so that we can begin to create a toolkit and resources that the industry can provide. It will include a meta-analysis of existing data sets so that can inform where we have gaps in information and research as we go forward. At this point, I'm going to turn the webinar over to Matt so he can give us some opening insights into downstream expectations and why they're so important to the feed industry. Matt?
Thank you, Laura. I appreciate the opportunity to visit with you and your members. When we think about the driving forces behind sustainability and why that's important to the U.S. feed industry, regardless of whether that feed is going into animal protein production or aquaculture or companion animals, it doesn't matter. The driving force behind this is following the money. If you follow the money, this goes back to what is called ESG ratings and environmental, social, and governance criteria. An equivalent of this is kind of similar to a credit score that you and your household would earn. Except in this case, the credit score is on firms and their deliverables for intangible assets. It has to do with the impact that they're making on the environment, the impact that they're making on society, and the quality of governance that they're delivering to their organization. If you boil it all down, what ESG ratings are helping investors do is to identify their risks, the risk of their brand showing up on the nightly news, and being headlined for something that could be less than ideal. Now, when it comes to commitments, because if you think about ESG ratings relate to what is the promise. And when it comes to the E, the environmental promise that people are making, they are greenhouse gas commitments. We see them blowing up in space every day. We see these things coming through, and we're wondering, what the heck does that mean? How does that work? How is their promise? What is their promise? The essence of a GHG commitment is that a brand takes a look at its entire supply chain and it says, I am committed to measuring, reporting, and verifying the reduction of CO2 equivalent emissions into the atmosphere. So if you look at animal protein, or if you look at the feed that goes into companion animal or aquaculture, that commitment, when you go upstream and you take a look, about 40 to 50%, sometimes even a little higher than that, but 40 to 50% of that greenhouse gas footprint is associated with the feed supply chain. Now, these ESG ratings firms that we were talking about before, they're taking a look at those commitments and they're qualifying them and they're saying, well, they're making great progress. They aren't making good progress. They get a higher score, they get a lower score. When interviewed, 80% of the companies with revenues greater than 250 million across the globe they have set GHG reduction goals. 25% of them don't know how they're going to achieve them. So they're looking upstream. They're looking at their feed supply chains and saying, hey, this is the big leg of the Pareto. We need to go after it.
Emily, it's great to get a chance to catch up with you today on downstream expectations from Nestle's viewpoint. I was reading an article this morning in Food Strategy, and Robert Earhart on Nestle's team said sustainability is no longer a nice to have, it's a must have. It's a license to operate. So as we think about that relative to Nestle and the feed industry, why is the food footprint of your supply chains important to your organization?
And it might seem odd, right? Why is a CPG company selling products like Stouffer's lasagna and DiGiorno pizza to consumers really focused all the way throughout the supply chain back at where the feed is grown for a lot of our great ingredients? And it really is based on what Robert said, because as a corporate largest food and beverage company in the world, we really take seriously the fact that we provide great tasting products to our consumers every day. And those products contain great tasting ingredients like cheese and meats and lots of dairy products. And so we're very heavily, as an organization in Nestle, dependent on the feed industry because we source a lot of the ingredients that you all support in making those animals healthy and nutritious, right? So it is all interrelated from that standpoint. And the reason why we really say that sustainability is no longer a nice to have, it's a need to have, is exactly to Matt's point about all the great information that he shared. We published as Nestle globally our net zero roadmap in December of 2020. And this laid out a strategy and action plans along the way to achieve actually net zero emissions by 2050. And admittedly, someone could ask, well, 2050 seems like a really long way away. How are you going to get there? And that speaks to the importance of the term roadmap.
In another virtual forum I was participating in, one of the feed industry CEOs was talking about the commitments that are being made around climate in particular. And with those commitments, as we heard Matt say, we don't necessarily know how we're going to get there, right? And so roadmaps are really important to the commitment process. And as we think about targets and goals, and it's one of the reasons we're taking on the sustainability roadmap here. So what are best practices that organizations like iFeeder and AFIA can use in developing their roadmap based on what you guys have learned at Nestle?
I think there's a few things that we really are focused on here at Nestle, and what I would offer is one, it has to be science-based. And I know a lot of the work you all are doing is to do meta-analysis and look at all the great data that is out there. And so that's a really important part of how to tackle that roadmap, what it should be founded in, and it should be founded in the best available science that we have. But in saying that, I will also say a best practice is not to have analysis paralysis, right? That at some point in time, what a climate roadmap and commitment is a bit of progress, not perfection, right? So what we want to do is be able to make the right activities on the ground at the right places, knowing that it will never be perfect. And so I think that's really, as we look at our supply chains and how we engage with our suppliers and vendors, we are looking for roadmaps that, quite frankly, we know aren't going to be perfect, but are actually committing the organization to a continuous improvement process.
Do you have any other advice as we kind of wrap up our conversation and experiences that you would like to share with AFI and iFeeder members as we take this sustainability journey?
Sure. We could definitely talk, I'm sure, all day about all the great things that are happening across U.S. agriculture. But I think one of the things that I would highlight that's maybe just a perspective from Nestle is how broad we are in sourcing our ingredients from the animal industry. And we also source and bring in a lot of ingredients for our pet food business as well. And so we're just really focused on how all of this interrelates. And so I just encourage AFIA and this initiative, as well as all the members, to think about not reinventing that wheel, not duplicating efforts. Again, we've done so much great work. We want to leverage that as an industry. We're here as Nestle to help support that and help cheerlead that. And I just think it's really, I'd want to leave you with the fact that, as a feed industry, you're serving a number of the animal livestock sectors across the great ingredients that we source. And so there's great opportunity to collaborate and help each other in that effort. And certainly we'd expect that, we really do leverage the great work that's been done.
Great, thanks, Emily. As we wrap up, Matt, do you have a question from your perspective that you want to give Emily a chance to answer?
Sure, thanks, Laura. Emily, when you think about past experiences and you think about where you know the US feed industry is coming from and trying to go towards in that development of that roadmap, let's just pretend like you had a magic wand and you could wave a magic wand and that magic wand could enable the US feed industry to deliver something to you in 2022. What would it be that they tied a bow around and handed to you?
Oh, that's an amazing question, Matt. And I love the opportunity just for a minute to to think about this. For us at Nestle, and again, it links back to how we're approaching our roadmap, is we are more empowered to tell the great story of the work that's being done in the feed industry when we have as much information and data as we can share. And so I think my magic wand would be some easy way to have aggregated, data that tells us what we know to be true, which is that farmers are doing excellent work on the ground, and that we have an opportunity to have that at a more regional and local level. Today, I'll admit, as a global company, we're pretty forced to use sort of national averages for a lot of the great communications that we like to make about our products and about our ingredients. What we'd love to get to eventually is much more data sharing and communication on the great work that's happening in that aggregated way. I do want to emphasize that this is my magic wand, of course, and I'd have all this information at the ready with a click of a button, but it is not my information. It is not Nestle's information. It is absolutely the farm's information. But we do want to feel like we're all empowered in this supply chain to send that great story forward. And so I just think the more we can do that, the better off we would be.
Thanks,
Well,
Em.
thanks, Matt and Emily, for joining us today. It was really great to have you guys a part of this webinar series and our conversation. Again, the reason that we are pursuing this webinar series is so that we can start to gather information and create awareness and educate the feed industry folks on sustainability. And it's in preparation for the Sustainability Roadmap project that we're launching in the next few weeks. We recognize that this is some work that we're doing on behalf of the industry, and there are costs tied to this project. And so if you have questions about the Sustainability Roadmap project or interest in the project or would consider making a contribution to support this work, I'd love to speak with you. My contact information is on the screen, or you can go to our website, ifeeder.org, and look at the sustainability webpage.